talk about procedural integrity today. This is the last module in the skills section. This entire module is about maintenance and generalization, and I threw in procedural integrity. It is part of the task list and what you need to know. I put it at the end because sometimes when I'm talking about it, I keep referencing interventions that you don't know yet if it's in the beginning. Procedural integrity is something that you need to think about for any intervention in skills. It's an extremely important concept in ABA. So, procedural integrity is the degree to which the treatment or intervention is implemented as intended. So it ensures that the client is exposed to the full intervention and that all steps are followed accurately and skillfully. If somebody makes a mistake during an intervention, what could happen is either the intervention is not effective, but it would have been effective had the person not engaged in, if the person had implemented the intervention as it was written. The official definition is the degree to which treatment is implemented as planned, also called treatment integrity, fidelity, or implementation fidelity. And so that's important because other fields, similar fields to ours, utilize different terminology, but it does mean the same thing. I switch between integrity and fidelity a lot when I talk about it. It all means the same thing. Sometimes we say treatment integrity, treatment fidelity, procedural integrity, procedural fidelity, and implementation fidelity or implementation integrity. It means that whatever was supposed to happen with the intervention, that's what happened. That's how people ran the intervention, and they ran it really accurately. They delivered reinforcement at the right time. They used the correct antecedent modifications. There's something called de-implementation integrity or de-implementation science. De-implementation is the degree which you're accurate when removing an intervention. I've written articles on de-implementation science, so if you come across it, you understand what that term means. In the same way, implementation means how we implement the intervention. De-implementation means how well we remove the intervention. The key components is adherence to the protocol, whatever the protocol, the treatment protocol is, quality of implementation, so how well it was implemented, did it have the right dosage? And when we talk about dosage, it's how much of the intervention someone's going to get. Exposure, like was a person actually exposed to it? Occasionally I've seen kids out sick and the teacher's implementing. Not that that's wrong, like maybe the implementation can help more than just that child in the classroom, but you have to make sure that the person's exposed to the intervention to have fidelity. Participant responsiveness and program differentiation. This is really important for clinical impact. Interventions only work if implemented correctly. Poor integrity will lead to poor outcomes, reduced trust, invalid data, and incorrect clinical decisions. So when you don't implement correctly, you're going to lose the trust of the stakeholders, probably lose the trust of the learner. Well, there's a lot of things that go wrong, and it will make your entire treatment inaccurate, incorrect, not work. In our ethics code, clients have a right to effective services. If you're not implementing with integrity, you're not going to have effective services. It is part of our code to have treatment integrity. The key components are, the first is adherence, were all the intervention steps followed. How I take fidelity, I'll tell you how I take fidelity data. I'll reference that a couple times, but essentially if you're doing behavior momentum, so three high probability requests and then the low probability requests. I write the steps very thoroughly like a task analysis for the tech or the person running it or even for myself. And so then what I do is when I observe to take fidelity data, I mark off that they implemented each step. So plus if they implemented, no, subtraction if they didn't implement that step. And like there might be other things in there, like how often is it implemented? I might take data on that. How many opportunities did they have? How often did they implement? And so what you generally get if you use that checklist is a percentage. You'll get like 90% they were implemented 90% of the time. That's how we take that data. Quality of implementations were the steps done correctly. You would give them a circle if they didn't go correctly, or a minus. Exposure was a client exposed to the full intervention. There could be a situation where you do the first two high probability requests and the person runs out of the room, so they're not exposed to the entire intervention. Participant responsiveness, were they engaged when it was delivered? And program differentiation, does this look different than others? That's a more complex concept, but a lot of that will help you determine a lot of things about your program. So if whatever you're doing with your learner looks like the same stuff they're just doing in their typical environment, you don't really have integrity because it's on a new program. Interventions will only work if implemented correctly. Poor integrity will lead to bad outcomes. It's sad because if people don't know that there's bad integrity and they just go, oh, this doesn't work, and they switch the program. I see that a lot happening in home-based services, clinic, school, everywhere, where the tech's just not trained well enough and they're not implementing correctly. And so then everyone thinks it just doesn't work, but had the tech had enough training, it might have been implemented correctly. Reduce the trust between the team and caregivers. This erodes all the confidence in the treatment process and can make data invalid or misleading, so leads to incorrect clinical decisions. So again, you might say this isn't working, let's move on to something else, when that's not, if it was implemented correctly, it might work. The ethics code is very clear on this, that we need to implement treatment plans as written, and clients have the rights to effective services. If you're not implementing correctly, they won't have effective services. This can lead to a lot of harm for your learners and your clients and their families. And then there's also legal liabilities here. Implementing unapproved or altered plans can be illegal. It just depends on where you're at. It's at least like against your funding source, most likely, or against the consent form that the caregiver signed. So you want to implement as well as you can. Here's some real examples of some integrity errors. Using a prompt not listed in the plan. That's so common. It happens all the time. If this happens, it's not necessary to fire that person. They just need more training. So if you think you're doing one of these, ask for more training. Behavior tech using a prompt that is not specified in the client's treatment plan. Reinforcing the wrong behavior. A behavior tech might provide reinforcement for an incorrect behavior instead of the target behavior. Failing to reset the timer in a timeout procedure, so they might stay in the timeout for too long, which would be a violation of their rights. Skipping baseline probes or pairing before instructions. A behavior tech jumping straight to instruction without first conducting baseline probes can also be a problem. So these are all these small errors, not the timeouts is kind of a bigger error, but these are these small errors that we need to sort out. If we take our procedural integrity data regularly, we'll know that it's being implemented correctly. And if not, we can adjust and provide more training or adjust things so that it works. So how do we measure this? I typically always do a direct observation. That's my choice. I'll have a checklist. I'll have some other data sources, like if we're using behavior momentum, I'll be taking data on how many opportunities were there, how many times was the tech coming upon a hard request that the student doesn't usually do, and so how often do they use behavior momentum. I'll also be checking that they're following all the steps, and I generate percentages with those. Video is great, but you can look at data sheets to determine whether you have procedural integrity. In some situations, I do like self-monitoring, so And that's easy to do. So this whole direct observation is the supervisor observing, which should happen some of the time. The supervisor can't typically be there all the time, but we can self-monitor all the time. We can have tech self-monitor. So I like giving them checklists to make sure throw it in like, hey, you do checklists, making sure that you followed all the steps. Peer review, colleagues observe each other's sessions and use a checklist to score the procedural integrity. So techs can watch each other and score. The supervisor should review that and then communicate with the techs. The techs shouldn't be telling each other that they're doing things wrong. Sometimes if you have a solid lead tech, that can happen, but typically it would be the supervisor. You can have the techs observe each other, fill out paperwork, look at it together, and then the supervisor can review with them all. This is a simple checklist for a teaching trial. The SD was delivered correctly. The prompt was used as written. So whatever written prompt reinforcement was delivered, inter-trial interval use. So you can utilize this this is just an example, but you would create this for all your interventions. Or your supervisor. Well, if you become a very advanced tech, you might create some. I've had really good techs do that for me occasionally. Common reasons for low integrity. The most common one is lack of training and understanding. Behavior techs may not have received the right training, and that's a huge problem within the field. 40 hours is great, but there needs to be more beyond this. It's really important that if you don't feel like you're adequately trained, you need to communicate and be assertive about asking for more training. Fatigue or distractions is also common. Factors like tiredness, environmental distractors, or multitasking can cause techs to miss or correct an implementation step. When procedures are way overly complex, this also happens. So procedures are too lengthy or convoluted to make it challenging for techs to remember and execute all your steps. Lack of feedback or supervision, so when they're not supervised or don't get enough feedback, that can also be a problem. A lot of BCBA agencies are overwhelmed with how many people need services, so they spread people a little bit thin, especially their supervisors. If you feel like that's your situation, communicate that you need more observation and supervision. If people are asking you to do multiple things during therapy, like take observation data, and if it's hard, tell your supervisor. We can spread things out where you're observing at different times and delivering therapy. To make sure you have really good, implementation, you want to make sure you're reviewing protocols before sessions. Even if you know the protocol, review it again. Occasionally, people write notes like, we got to do this or that, but it's good to review every time. Make sure you're asking questions when unclear. If any part of the protocol is unclear, ask your supervisor for clarification rather than guessing. Request modeling. If you don't know how to do something and provide feedback on your performance, ask for feedback. Use written guides or checklists. Having written material about what you're doing is the most useful. Always make sure you're honest with your data. Your supervisor needs to provide you with good training on all of this, and you should have regular observations. Use integrity checklists and provide score. They should be taking data on your integrity on a monthly basis, if not more, and then providing you with data on that, telling you what's going wrong or what's going right, and give specific positive or corrective feedback. So provide constructive feedback that highlights the areas of strengths and identifies opportunities for improvement. And then provide opportunities for practice or mastery. Okay, so ways you could improve your overall integrity is role play or rehearse your interventions with the supervisor on a regular basis and get that feedback. Watch video modeling of other people doing it. If you're unsure or want to make sure you're doing it correct, ask for video modeling. It's very easy to gather that. The other thing is, I think it's good for, as a whole company, to kind of review video modeling as much as possible. A lot of times you're in isolation in these home programs and doing it the way you were taught, but like other people are doing it different ways. But it's better to like all look at it and determine the best way and then make sure everything's standardized. Frequent feedback during or after sessions. Make sure you're asking for that feedback and receiving it. And simplify the procedures where possible. If you think something's complex, tell your supervisor. Things should be simple. Most of this stuff is simple to do. It's harder to understand why we're doing it. Content, like delivering reinforcement, is not difficult. It's not complex. It's something that most people can do. So make sure that that's how these procedures feel. Okay, use visuals or laminated guides near your workstation. Quickly reference all your steps while you're, or workstations or within the bind or wherever you're working. That's always helpful. If you're unsure of something, don't do it, don't make it up, don't compromise, ask for help. The big thing here with integrity is fully understanding the data, like how someone might take integrity on you, and then knowing what, ask for help. Always request more training. See what your supervisor can do to help you with training. Procedural integrities mean implementing exactly as it was written, protecting clients and ensuring valid outcomes. We measure it through observation and checklists, sometimes permanent product, sometimes video, and then both you and your supervisor, this is your responsibility, and you can improve your integrity by training, feedback, and preparation. Thank you.